This is CBC News World, Canada's #1 news network.
Stay with us. This story is coming up next.
The head of Paramount said, you know what, I think American audiences are ready for this.
Lights, cameras, U.S. action. Why Canadian drama is hitting its prime south of the border. There's been a lot of bad news about the Canadian television industry lately. Shows cancelled, local stations shut down. But there's some bright light amidst all the gloom. More and more Canadian dramas are finding audiences in the U.S. And that means a lot of homegrown talent can keep working right here at home. The National's arts reporter, Sandra Abma, has that story.
Suspect is cornered. Need backup immediately.
I'm just trying to help you. Please, just let me help you.
I want to go home.
Our therapy has been a big step back. So the last thing I want to do to top off this craptacular day is a session.
What do all these Canadian TV shows have in common? They're all broadcast on American TV.
It's not a movie, Oz. It doesn't happen that way.
You might call it an explosion of Canadian stars, Canadian stories, Canadian talent. Hitting the mark with American viewers.
Survival of the fittest elevated to the highest levels of
For
corporate
decades,
technology.
talented Canadians have gone stateside to find successful careers in the TV industry. But now there may be a reason for them to stay home.
This Canadian show came on like gangbusters when it debuted on CBS last summer. Flashpoint was the most watched new drama of the season on American television.
When Anne-Marie and I went down to pitch the show at CBS, I mean, nobody down in LA knew us or really knew very many Canadian producers.
This is like a huge roller coaster ride, and there are we're moving way faster because we have to deliver a lot sooner for the American system, and we have there are greater expectations on the show.
It's the first Canadian series to air in prime time on a U.S. network since Paul Gross suited up in a Mountie uniform in 1994. But why is all this made-in-Canada TV landing on prime time in America? U.S. cable channels and networks are hungry for content.
We are definitely seeing a lot more Canadian product than we were used to seeing here in the States.
This American TV critic says Canada's big break came last year when the 14-week writers' strike paralyzed the U.S. television industry.
Last year there was a big writers' strike which actually prevented shows from going into production, so suddenly networks needed product and there was all this great Canadian stuff available for them.
Canadian producers stepped into the void with well-made, exciting TV. American networks liked what they saw and wanted more.
Now every other U.S. network wants to have a meeting with us. What have you got?
Christina Jennings is the producer of The Listener. The show about a psychic paramedic is set to air this summer on CTV and NBC.
I think our production values have always been actually pretty amazing, but I know when I go to Los Angeles and people say, oh, I've seen an episode of The Listener. It looks fantastic. You can't tell it's Canadian. I'm thinking, well, what did we do before? You know, I mean, I think as a country, we definitely have gotten much better at our craft. And in fairness, the Americans are the best in the world at this business. And so in a way, that's a high benchmark.
35, take 4.
Cameras are rolling on the Toronto set of Flashpoint. The show follows an elite tactical team based on the Toronto Police Emergency Task Force.
I didn't like the sound of that scream.
Enrico Colantoni and Hugh Dillon star as the team leaders.
You know, this show has forced the American business community in the entertainment business to rethink everything, because really they underestimated the potential.
The low loonie, generous tax credits, solid production crews and facilities, it's all made Canada a great shoot location. Until now, Canada has been in disguise, masquerading as generic U.S. cities and towns. But now the mask is off, and our TV exports don't hide where they're coming from.
It was very important to us that we set this show in Toronto. And we told these people at CBS and Paramount that that was the case. And there was sort of a moment's hesitation while they reflected on that. And then the head of Paramount said, you know what, I think American audiences are ready for this.
CBC TV's Being Erica airs on ABC's SoapNet, a cable channel with an audience of over 71 million people. Erin, Martin, and Jana Sinyor are the creators and executive producers of Being Erica. They say Canadian shows are cheaper to produce, and in this economy, that makes them attractive to U.S. networks.
I think that the reality in the States right now is where they really can't afford the shows they're doing is making the networks down there look north and say, oh, you can actually shoot shows that look as good as ours for not as much money, and you can bring in other broadcasters, and you can just make it an easier economic model in a time when nobody's buying advertising anymore.
And the great thing about Canada is that for all these years, we've actually become really, really good at what we do. And we can do it a lot cheaper than most people in the world. Like, we do it much cheaper than the Brits. We've always done it much cheaper than the Americans. So I think we're again in this perfect position of being able to say, we can do it cheaper. We will still give you those great production values. So, come here.
I didn't have to come down here and have this little face-to-face with you.
This summer, CBS will also be running another Canadian co-production, The Bridge, about Toronto street cops. And the U.S. cable channel ION has picked up the CBC's The Border and Global's The Guard.
Well, this obviously is good news for Canadian talent, for Canadian actors, for Canadian writers, and obviously for Canadian crew people as more programming is shot there in Canada, and U.S. programming as well.
It seems like we're sensing a change in the industry. How would you describe that?
A few years ago, getting a U.S. sale was sort of unheard of. Yeah. Now there's a bunch of shows that have U.S. sales. It sort of puts you in a position where you don't know where it's going. You hope a lot of people will watch it. That's ultimately why we make it.
I'm hoping a show like Flashpoint is like the pioneer in television, that the U.S. market, because it's a considerably larger market than Canada, they will continue to come to Canada. So Canadians don't have to fly to L.A. They don't have to leave the place that they've grown up.
But isn't it fun? It's so nice to be able, I'm very grateful to be able to be a working actor, but also working in my own country on a fantastic show. It's so exciting.
It's 7:30 and 16 degrees in downtown Toronto.
American networks came here shopping for bargains when their cupboards were bare. But what they're getting is quality. The hope is they'll keep looking north for programming after the economic crisis is over. Sandra Abma, CBC News, Toronto.